Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if our brains are just really good at guessing, or if there is a deeper reason behind our hunches? Today we're diving into a fascinating study about how we make decisions and how our brains might be using a clever sampling process. So imagine the human mind as a super complex computer. We have amazing tools like neural networks that can learn from tons of information. But sometimes these tools are like black boxes. We know they work, but we're not entirely sure how. On the other hand, we have really clear theories like Bayesian models that tell us how an ideal brain should work like a perfect reasoner. They tell us what's the most logical thing to do. But real people aren't always perfectly logical. We make mistakes, we get biased, and our behavior doesn't always match these ideal models. One big challenge is that current models often rely on simplified ideas about what we see. Researchers have to tell the model what's important in a picture or a sound. This means the model might miss out on important details that we humans naturally pick up on. Another issue is that these models usually only predict a very limited type of response. They're not very flexible, and to top it off, these models are often siloed. Meaning a model for understanding faces won't help you understand language. It's like having a different screwdriver for every single screw. This new research proposes a super cool two-part system to tackle these problems. First, they use a neural network trained on real-world data to act as an implicit Bayesian model, or IBM. Think of this as the brain's way of understanding the world. It takes in complex stuff, like a picture of a face, and turns it into a map of probabilities. It's like the network learns the rules of the world from lots of examples without being explicitly told what to look for. This IBM then creates a probability distribution, which is basically a sophisticated guess about reality. But knowing probabilities isn't the same as making a decision. That's where the second part comes in, called the Autocorrelated Bayesian sampler, or ABS. This is like the brain's decision-making engine. Instead of just spitting out the most likely answer, the ABS actually samples from the probabilities the IBM creates. It's like asking multiple friends for advice, but with a twist. These samples are autocorrelated, meaning each new guess is influenced by the last one. This is super important because it explains why our decisions can be a bit wobbly, why we might repeat mistakes, or why we sometimes feel stuck on an idea. So the whole system works like this. You start with loads of examples of real-world data paired with correct answers. Then you train a neural network, the IBM, to learn the underlying probabilities from this data. Finally, you use the EBS to sample from these probabilities and generate predictions about how humans would behave. This framework is designed to be super flexible, working across different types of information and different tasks. They tested this IBM ABS framework on 3 different tasks. The first was forecasting, like trying to guess what the stock market will do next. They found that people often overreact to new information, which makes sense if your brain is always trying to guess based on recent events. And your past experiences, when people saw sequences that looked like stock prices, they tended to assume things would continue going up or down more than they actually did. This overreaction, they argue, isn't just a mistake, but a rational way of making predictions when you have a lot of past experience with similar-looking data. The really cool part here is that they showed this overreaction could be explained by the system's prior beliefs learned from real-world data, not just by limited memory or attention. If the IBM was trained on data that looked like stock market trends, it would also overreact. This suggests that what we consider a bias might actually be the brain making the best guess it can with the information and experience it has. And the ABS then introduces the dynamic sampling process that leads to those observable behaviors. Next, they looked at estimating age from faces. We know humans are not perfect at this. We tend to be conservative, maybe overestimating the age of young people and underestimating older people, and we also get anchored by the previous face we saw, or even our own age. Using their IBM, they could actually test how different people might see faces. They used the technique called solarization to mess with images, making them more uncertain. They found that their IBM, like humans, would shift its age predictions towards the middle. This hints that we might have a middle age prior in our brains, not an old age prior, as some previous studies suggested. This is important because it shows how the framework can help us test and refine our understanding of human biases by seeing how an ideal model reacts to manipulated stimuli. And to explain the anchoring biases, they use the ABS. They realized that if the ABS starts its sampling process from the previous guess, or a reference age, it naturally creates that anchoring effect. Even when they used ABS parameters from the forecasting task, it still worked for age estimation. This suggests that this sampling mechanism might be a general brain process for making decisions. Their third task was about how we judge probabilities in situations involving physical events, like knowing if a cannonball will hit a balloon and the balloon will land on grass. Here, Humans often do something called the conjunction fallacy. They judge a specific scenario with two things happening as more likely than just one of those things happening, which breaks the rules of probability. They compare two ideas for why this happens. One idea is that we simplify our mental simulations to save effort. The other idea, which aligns with their apps model, is that we just don't perform enough simulations. When judging more complex events, we might draw fewer samples, and that limited sampling can lead to those illogical judgments. Their results supported the idea that it's the limited sampling, not necessarily the simplification of individual simulations, that causes this fallacy. The ABS model, with its sampling process, was able to capture this. This is a really powerful idea because it suggests that common biases in probability judgment might not be because we're bad at math, but because our brain is efficiently using its limited resources to make good enough guesses. So the big picture here is that the IBM EBS framework is a major step towards building a general theory of cognition. It combines the power of neural networks to learn from complex real-world data with the interpretability of process models that explain the underlying decision-making steps. By making models stimulus computable, meaning they can work directly with raw sensory input. And by separating the representation learning from the decision process, this framework allows us to explore how realistic experiences shape our judgments and how common cognitive processes lead to diverse behaviors. This research opens up a lot of doors. For example, they suggest that future work could use generative models to learn more complex representations, like understanding relationships between things, rather than just predicting a single outcome. They also mentioned the possibility of training these IBMs to be more domain. General, meaning one network could potentially understand many different things, which would be much closer to how our brains seem to work with shared systems. And importantly, they highlight that prior experience is key, and understanding individual differences in these prior experiences could lead to personalized models of cognition. Ultimately, this research gives us a powerful new lens to understand the human mind. It says that many of the flaws or biases we see in human behavior might not be flaws at all, but rather the intelligent, resource-rational way our brains make the best possible guesses given the complex, uncertain, and experience-rich world we live in. It's a framework that can grow and adapt, helping us understand everything from how we forecast the future to how we recognize a friend's face, all stemming from a shared set of cognitive principles. What I love about this study is how it bridges the gap between ideal theories of cognition and the messy reality of human behavior. By using neural networks to learn realistic representations and then applying a sampling process to explain those deviations from pure logic, they've created a model that's both powerful and explanatory. It's a reminder that our brains are incredibly efficient problem solvers. We're not just spitting out answers, we're actively sampling and iterating. Now, of course, like any study, there are always more questions. What exactly are the autocorrelated samples happening in our brains? How do these sampling parameters vary from person to person, and can we reliably measure them? And how can we extend this to even more complex cognitive tasks like creative problem solving or social interaction? These are exciting avenues for future research. If you found this breakdown helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more deep dives into the human mind. Let me know your thoughts on this sampling idea in the comments below. See you next time.